this session today we will talk about the managerial flexibility. In fact, in the last sessions we have seen that is if you want to maintain the interpersonal relationship, then in interpersonal relationship it becomes very important that is you understand others first and get understood by yourself also. So, for this purpose it becomes very important. Many times the personality, the ego clashes, the conflict management, and that all these interventions for managing the interpersonal relationship that requires a flexibility. That is why this particular session has been kept for the managing the flexibility. And in this flexibility we are talking about the first the introduction and then the elements of the managerial flexibility. What are the different elements are there of the managerial flexibility? Then managerial flexibility, fit and organizational responsiveness. Therefore, how we can be the fit with and we can be responsive to the organization. Then the human resource and the people flexibility. What is the HR flexibility and people flexibility? And finally, the dimensions of the human resource flexibility that we will be discussing. First we will start with the organizational flexibility, that is what we understand by the organizational flexibility. The overall flexibility of an organization as a system that is required, defined by a set of resources, that is technology, personnel, financial resources and knowledge of the employees. Because whenever we talk about the knowledge of the employees, then definitely in that case we talk about the human capital. The level of the human capital that will decide the level of the resources. Whenever we talk about that is the high order of thinking that I have discussed with the design thinking also, and then we will having that particular level of knowledge. And if we are having the highest level of the thinking, that is a high level of knowledge is there, and that will decide the overall the system of an organization. Then processes in the organizations, how are the processes are there? For example, nowadays in addition to the operations, tasks and routines, we are working on that is the how this technology is helping in the processes. Like you see, when you want to maintain a comfort zone for your employees, then definitely in that case your processes nowadays is required to be the tech savvy, and tech savvy and tech supported processes are there, then definitely in that case your organization will be having the more conducive environment, and in the short period of time the people will be able to get their personal and professional work. And managerial functions, for example, the planning, organizing, staffing, leading, directing and controlling is there. So, whenever we are talking about the flexibility in the planning, as we know that is the planning process. In the planning process itself we are talking we talk about that is the how this the you decide our goals. Goals are becoming very important, and when we decide about the goals, then these goals are to be the realistic and achievable, but these goals are to be achieved in the given environment. Now, and this environment is dynamic. This particular factor which decide your achievement of the goal, and this particular factor is the very much dynamic. So, as a result of which it becomes sustainable. To become sustainable, it one has to be highly flexible, because as soon as the environment change, your goals may be shifted either little bit here and there, or the overall goal also may be changed. Therefore, it becomes very important in managerial functions, the flexibility, that is the our planning, that planning is required to be changed. Now, but as soon as your goals or the planning of the organization change, it is affecting the number of employees, the overall employees. Now, if the employees, those who are not very flexible and they are rigid, then they will not be able to continue with this particular change of goals, shifting of goals. So, in any organization, whenever we talk about the managerial functions, in managerial functions the first and foremost is the flexibility in planning, in deciding the goals and change of the goals. And not only this, whenever we are talking about this achievement of goals through the different the alternatives then these goals can be you can achieve by the different ways. Maybe this side, maybe that side. Sometimes you decide by the time management, sometimes you decide by the people management, and therefore these alternatives are there. And to achieve these alternatives, it becomes very important, that is the how your manager that is having that system in which this type of the changes can be incorporated. Second is the organizing. In the organizing, it becomes very important, that is the how we are going for the particular process, and that process of that is the organizing, and in the organizing it becomes the span of management, span of control. When we are giving the different roles and responsibilities to the people, and as I mentioned, that is as per the need, business environment are based, these roles and responsibility may be changing, exchanging, and if it is exchanging from the one role to another role, then definitely the organization system will be affected, because you are changing the people, and that time also the organization, because it is the need and we are making the changes on the need based, and therefore this type of the organizing environmental factors that is required to be the change, and in that case we will find that is the organizing is to be done. Similarly, when we are talking about the leading managerial functions, so leading managerial functions, they talk about that is the how situational you are making the changes, and flexible is there. So, like in Fiedler's model, it is based on the 8 situations, and it is based on the relationship, the task and positions, and when we are talking about this task, position and the relationship of the superior subordinate, it will keep on changing. Sometimes the task is high, sometimes it is low, position is strong, sometimes it is weak, relationship is good, sometimes it is poor, and therefore the leader has to adopt the flexibility of the changing of his leadership style. If he is able to change his leadership style, then he will be having the better tune up. Another model which talk about the Hershey and Blanchard's in the superior subordinate relationship, that is the how you can change your leadership style with the maturity of the people. Sometimes you are getting the unable and unwilling, then definitely the tailing style will prevail. Sometimes you are getting the unable, but they are willing, then definitely your support is required, it is a selling style will work. Toughest type is the people are able and unwilling, and then you have to change your leadership style. So, then it will not be the telling, it will not be the selling, but it will be the participating style of the leadership. And whenever we are adopting the participating style of leadership, then the able and unwilling will be converted into the able and willing. And finally, that is the able and willing style of these subordinates, and then in that case the leader has to require the delegating style of leadership. So, whenever we are talking about this type of the leadership styles and change of leadership, then it becomes very important, that is the how you are able to change your leadership style, you are flexible enough and to develop a proper relationship between the superior and subordinate is there, and therefore the leading style is there. So, these leading and acting styles, the strategies that will depend upon the maturity level of the subordinates of the superior. And when we talk about the managerial flexibility, the managerial flexibility has been defined as an entity's ability to change its policies, practices or procedures quickly and easily to adapt to the diverse and changing demands of the environment. So, as per the, as I mentioned, the change of the demands of the environment will be there, manager has to be flexible. That can be related to many elements in the organization, especially for the supply chain management or the green supply chain management or the operations management is there. Or when we are talking about the digital marketing nowadays, then definitely in that case also managerial flexibility is required. HR flexibility I will be discussing in the detail, because it is directly related with our skills of interpersonal dynamics, and organization structures and the strategies are there. So, whenever we are talking about the structural changes, so in structural changes not only the organization structure is there, but the team changes is there, team formation, team formulation, that becomes also important. As we know that whenever any team is formed, then there are the different stages in the team, that is the forming, storming, norming, performing and adjourning. Now, whenever we are talking about the forming, storming, norming, performing and adjourning, then definitely in that case the time, if there is no flexibility, then the storming period that will reach to the maximum. To avoid this maximum of the storming period, so we have to form these norms as soon as possible, because as soon as you create the norms, that you will be performing. So, it becomes very important that whenever we are talking about the team formation, in the team formation it becomes important, that is there is the performing will start with the norming of these, the as soon as you are creating the norms. To create these norms, there is a lot of understanding is required. In the team dimensions, it becomes very important whenever you are creating suppose a project is there and you are working in that particular project, the project structure will change, the leader will change. As soon as the leader will change, the dynamics, group dynamics will change. And if this group dynamics that by the group dynamic structure will require to be controlled, and that control by the managerial flexibility, that will be only possible. So, therefore, in that case it becomes very important that whenever we are talking about this type of these changes, then in that case it becomes necessary, that is the what structure we are creating. Earlier we were talking about the tall structure, and therefore, if these are the number of the employees in an organization, then the levels were much more. But now we are talking about the flat structure, and here the number of employees are same, but they are given the one level, and as a result of which in spite of the tall structure, the flat organization structure is working. Why? Because now this particular bureaucratic system, superior subordinate reporting, like this person has to report to this person has to report this and this and this. So, there is a so long channel is there. Now, this person has to report to this person only, and therefore, as a result of which you will find that is there is not a much reporting system, and there is not much level and not much reporting system. So, the relationship that will be more clear and transparent. If you want to create a more clear and transparent relationship, then definitely your structure formation, that should be according to the need of the organization, and this is the managerial flexibility. So, the strategy is the another factor element where the managerial flexibility is required, because in the dynamic environment, as we have seen in the changing demands of the environment, it becomes very important, that is you are able to keep making the changes into the your working style and the strategies of the organization. So, what is required to manage the flexibility? In elements of the managerial flexibility is required variety. Variety as the alternative measures that managers develop to cope with the change. That is the whatever change is there, he is able to cope up, and for this purpose his emotional stability is becoming the another important factor. If he is emotional stable, then definitely the alternative measures which are available to him, then he will be able to adopt. The temporal flexibility or the speed indicates the ease of deployment and the rapidity with which these measures produce the effects. And here it becomes very important, that is the whatever the ease of deployment is there, we are functioning is becoming very smooth, and there is a rapidity with these measures, and if there are the measures, different measures are there, then there will be definitely the rapidity. The cost involves the real capacity of the company to deploy or redeploy these measures given its economic resources, and whatever the cost is involved, then the real capacity of the company is to deploy or redeploy, and therefore, these measures can given the economic resources are there. Intentionality indicates the defensive or the proactive nature of the measures and the use that management makes of them, and therefore, it becomes very important, that is whatever the intentionality is there, whether the in response to the environment, the person is becoming defensive, or the person the manager is becoming defensive, or he is becoming the proactive. Naturally, when you know that what are the challenges are going to be to occur, and then looking to the change in the environment, and you become the proactive, you change your systems, you change your structure, you change your strategy, then definitely in that case, if it is a proactive nature of the measures is there, then the management makes the use of them. So, the managerial flexibility, it goes with the strategic flexibility, structural flexibility, operational flexibility, internal and external scopes are there. So, strategic flexibility can be related to the any aspect, whether it is a long term strategy or it is a short term strategy is there. Strategy is to be intro or is to be the extro, and therefore, in that case, in all this type of the strategic process, it becomes very important, that is the how you are creating that strategic flexibility. Structural flexibility I have already discussed in that part, that is the you can go for the tall and the short structure and change the roles and responsibility in your structures is there. Operational flexibility is that is the how you are making the your production processes or supply chain management processes, and therefore, you can control your cost also, because the cost is involved, and therefore, you can control your cost. Nowadays, the operational flexibility has become very popular in the cost control. Then internal and external scopes are there, and therefore, in that case it becomes very important, that is the how your internal sources and external sources they keep on changing, because whenever we are talking about the manpower or machine or material, money, method and minutes. So, therefore, with these internal sources, that is your man and machinery, right, and then your financial conditions it is there, but when you are talking about the dependency on these methods and the material and the time, therefore, the external stakeholders role that is becoming very important. For example, in the material, the supplier's role. The supplier's role, that is the external scope is there, and then how they are taking the time minutes for that particular process, and similarly then the methods also. Methods are depending on the environment. Today you are adopting the one method, but with the change of time you have to adopt the another method, and when you adopt the another method, then definitely that external scopes that is going to be the increase. So, in detail now we will talk about the ability to adapt to environmental changes, that is a fundamental flexibility concept is there, and when turbulent and hyper competitive environments are there. Nowadays we are talking about the different nature of industries, and then we are talking about the economic conditions of these industries, and therefore, in that case, if this is a turbulent time, we have to cope with the higher competitive environments, then definitely there will be lot of strategic flexibility is required. Capacity that enables the mutation. If you want to meet that particular scope, then definitely you are required to have that particular capacity. The potential of a company to transform itself, and therefore, in that case it will become a very high potential of a company, that is the how you can transform. Like we will take the very popular example of the GE, and therefore, in the GE by the Jack Welch we find that is how there the transform has been taken place. Similarly, many times when we talk about the Steel Authority of India Limited SAIL, then the case study also talks about that is how the company has been transformed. Many times you will find that is the MSMEs. They are required frequently to transform themselves, and then they transform, because unless and until they if they go by the transactions, by the time they will meet their change, the environment again keep on changing, then there will be no use of change. So, you are required to change at the time, change and flexible at the time when there is the immediate need, and then you have to change your strategies, and when you change your strategies, then definitely you will be able to meet the competitive environment. Generate the response flexibility, and therefore, in that case you can generate that particular response flexibility in the case of the effective managerial flexibility. Engendering organizational adaptation, the very common example is of the technology, that is the how the organizations they keep on these adaptation of that particular organization. Then the learning of the organizations, that is the how fast. Now here we have to understand the difference between the organizational learning and learning organization. So, when an employee joins, and that time when we talk about the employees, that is the how he is learning the organization. If he is learning the organization, then in that case it is understanding the culture of the organization, the system of the organization, the process of the organization, and therefore he is learning that particular organization is there, right. And when we are talking about the learning organization, it means the whole organization, right, that is going to be the learn by this particular process, that is the process by which the organization is learning. So, this learning organization that becomes very important whenever we are talking about the changes and flexibility. If we are having that particular changes and flexibility, then definitely we will be able to come with this particular organizational learning and processes. In this case of the organizational learning and the processes, one the flexibility comes for example the automation. So, therefore, then we are talking about the automation is there, then it will be making the organization learning organization, and therefore, organization has to understand what changes are required in their manufacturing process, in their production process. And if there is a manufacturing and production process is there, then definitely in that case it will become important, that is the how organizations they are learning. Now, in the case of this process of learning, then we talk about the structural flexibility. In the structural flexibility refers to the flexible structure which is less formalized and the more decentralized is there. If we are talking about, that is the how should be an organization. When we are talking about the LEs will be required the more and more decentralized, because if they are not decentralized, then in that case it will become a very important aspect, that is the how they are able to work in this particular changing environment, and therefore that is the more decentralization is there, right. So, that will be the, as I mentioned, from the tall structure to the flat structure, then they will require to develop a particular change in the organization structure. If they include both managerial as well as the human resource management practices, like when we are talking about the managerial practices, which are the managerial practices? Managerial practices are those practices which are having that particular planning, organizing, directing, leading, controlling, coordinating and strategic changes. But whenever we are talking about the human resource management, then in human resource management we talk about the structural changes into the organization structures. When we are talking about the changes into the recruitment system, we are talking about the changes in their training and development system, and then in that case we will talk about, that is the human resource management changes are there. When we are talking about the labor flexible practices and effect on performance, naturally whenever there is the relation, there is a high relationship, because when we talk about the modes model, they talk about, that is the productivity, I have discussed in the previous session also, that is the productivity, flexibility and adaptability. So, therefore, when we are talking about the interpersonal dynamics, then interpersonal dynamics manager is required to have a structural flexibility, because then labor flexible practices that will create the good industrial relations and human resource relations. If we want to develop a positive relationship between employee and employee, employee and employer, and employer and employer, and we want to have a less industrial disputes, then in that case that labor flexible practices that are required to be very much common in the organization. As we know, that is the social phenomena is changing into the different organizations. As we know, that is the geographical, the demographical variables, for especially the age, gender and economic status, they are keep on changing, and therefore they have to effect on the performance. And when we talk about this particular type of the performances, effect on the performances, definitely we will talk about that is the we have to be the structural flexibility. The system of authority, the job design, the training system as I mentioned, work teams, participation, personal selection, recruitment and selection, and even the compensation system. For example, nowadays we talk much about the fixed pay and the variable pay. When we talk about the fixed and variable pay, so definitely it is an example of the compensation system. So, in the organizational flexibility, it involves ordinary capacities based on the organization structures or the current objectives, short term flexibility that involves day to day operations and can affect the speed and cost of the firm's operations. The response is there. This is all about the organizational responsibility. In internal flexibility is the capacity of organizations to adapt to the environment, while the external flexibility refers to their capacity to influence the environment and thus to reduce their vulnerability. Organizations should not only adapt to a changing environment, but simultaneously have the ability to change that environment, and that is the leadership. So, when we talk about the leadership and development, that is the we are affecting the environment, business environment. How we can affect the business environment? By our innovations and creativity. When our organization is having the number of good IPs, intellectual properties, number of the good practices of the creativity and innovations, our employees are more and more innovative, then definitely in that case the total scenario of that particular nature of organization will affect to the overall industry. And as soon as you affect the overall industry, then there will be the external factors that will be getting affected. Changing the organizational environment through actions like the innovations, communication and advertisement. So, when you communicate outside about your organization and talks about that is how your innovations will lead you to reduce the cost. When we are talking about the robotics, when we are talking about the artificial intelligence, when you are talking about the decision science, then definitely that will affect the overall scenario of not only that organization, but the industry. And this is possible only with the help of whatever the human resources you are having in your organizations. When we talk about the managerial flexibility fit in organizational responsiveness, by analyzing this gap, we can determine the lacks and excesses that can be used to assess the changes needed inside the organization and the managerial direction required. So, therefore, who makes these changes? It is the managers who makes changes. The leaders inside the organization, they make changes, and when they make the changes in the system, they make the changes in the system to be more effective, more productive, and when managers are more adaptive themselves. So, this type of leaders, they will create more flexible organizations. If you want to change your organization, if you want to create the competitiveness in the organization, you want to meet the challenges of competition, and then in that case it becomes very, very important that there is a managerial direction is required. A firm that is capable of adapting to and are influencing the environment will try to sustain a gap close to 0 over time. And when the gap is 0 or is close to 0, the firm is in a situation of fit and does not require an organizational change. Therefore, organization is so proactive An organization is so responsive, that is that there will be not require any organizational change, and therefore, in that case it becomes very very important, that is organizational fit and organizational responsiveness, that is become the popular. Now, very important point in the flexibility is required, that is if you want to keep a good environment, work condition, environment, relationship amongst the employees, then you are required the human resource and people flexibility. HR flexibility refers to the extent to which employees possess skills and behavioral repertoires that can provide a firm with the options to pursue strategic alternatives. So, dear friends, that is the how the HR flexibility, that is becoming the employees possesses the skills and behavioral repertoires, and this is possible only when a firm with the options to pursue the strategic alternatives are there. And when you adopt the strategic alternatives, and there in that case you will have the HR flexibility and repertoires. Employees like these mobilize through the appropriate human resource practices. Whenever there is an appropriate human resource practices, then definitely in that organization you will find the people are more competitive because they are flexible, constitute a source of competitive advantage, and therefore, as a result of which you are able to develop that competitive advantage. So, basically in human resource flexibility, there is a employee skill flexibility, employee behavior flexibility, and HR practices flexibility is there. Employee skill flexibility, valuable because they generate the output streams like for the existing requirements, and are also capable of producing output for the possible alternative requirements. So, therefore, as soon as there is a new tech skill is required, tech savvy employees are required, they are able to change, flexible. Skills possessed by the employees but not currently used may open up new opportunities of business for the firm, and indeed may influence strategic choices, and therefore, as I mentioned earlier that there is a strategic flexibility also, that strategic flexibility we can use into the employee skill flexibility. There will be the certain employees, those who will be the specialist employees. These employees provide the flexibility by allowing the firm to reconfigure skill profiles to meet the changing needs. So, whatever the changing needs are there, they will require to adopt. When the need arises, the firm may reorganize its employees, example is through project teams, and to achieve the desired skill profile to fit with the change demand, and therefore, in the organization, especially in the leading organizations, you will find there are the specialists and champions are working, and these people they get fit into the desired skill profile. Thus, a wide range of employee skill contributes to flexibility, and this wide range can be gained by the having a smaller number of employees with broad based skills, or a large number of employees with more narrow and specialist skills. It depends on the need of the organization. At the organizational level, firms develop their own combination of skills with the variety of HR applications, and they implement over a number of years, and therefore, there is a bouquet of the different skills and need of the employees, and therefore, those employees with the different skills, they are able to match the goal. A firm may develop the skill flexibility through the processes such as job rotation. Then how to develop this flexibility? Job rotation, cross functional teams, and project based work arrangements, all of which generate the broad skill configuration specific to the firm that are not easily replicable. Employee behavior flexibility is the capacity of people to adapt to changing situations or to exhibit appropriate behavioral repertoires under the different situations. It can be distinguished from the skill flexibility in the sense that the employees may be skilled but lack the behavioral motivation to change, or they may be highly motivated but lack the necessary skills or knowledge to make the change decisions. Firms can enhance their behavioral flexibility by intentionally recruiting individuals who exhibit higher level of adaptability, and naturally the high level of adaptability is important. Behavioral flexibility also involves a greater tolerance level of the organization for non-routine behavior, because as soon as the environment is becoming dynamic, your technology is changing, your processes are changing, your strategies are changing, then therefore, the people should have the high level of tolerance to adaptability, which can only be achieved by fostering an appropriate culture, and when you develop that culture to adopt a change, then definitely they will not be disturbed. Values at the individual level, adaptable individual adjust to the complexities and novelties of the change situations, and therefore, losses associated with the lack of change are the minimized is there. At values at the individual level is required, that is the adaptable individuals adjust to the complexities and novelties, and the value at the organizational level, behavior flexibility is valuable because it enables the firm to deal with a variety of situations and facilities is there. Finally, I will talk about the HR practices flexibility. HR practices flexibility creates value in several ways. The firm is more readily able to adopt its HR practices to change situations. Flexibility of HR practices may induce flexible employee behaviors. HR practice flexibility allows the firm to offer similar HR practices across different units, achieving the strategic consistency while adopting parameters to meet the local concerns. And therefore, in that case, this type of the flexibility whenever there is existing among the organization, then definitely people will be ready to the change, people will be, organization will be ready to create and to meet competitiveness and develop a culture which will be having the more relationship, because there with the change there is no stress. Organizations and the team which is created and the people in that particular project in that team, they will have the good interpersonal relationship because they have adopted a culture of flexibility. So, this is all about the managerial flexibility. Thank you.